All right, so now that the December numbers are finally out, we can stop reacting to individual months and actually talk about the full story of 2025. Because if you follow real estate at all this year, you probably heard completely opposite narratives. Some people were saying that the market was falling apart. Others said that nothing had really changed. And depending on where you live in Florida, your experience probably didn't match either extreme. What really happened in 2025 wasn't a crash. It wasn't a comeback. It was a shift. And once you understand that shift, a lot of what felt confusing this year suddenly starts to make sense. So let's walk through what actually happened across Florida as a whole. And then we're going to break down Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach County, because the differences between these three markets tell you almost everything you need to know about where we are and what comes next. When we look at Florida statewide, the first thing that stands out is that activity never stopped. Yes, prices did soften slightly. The statewide median single family price finished 2025 just under $414,000, about 1.4% lower than the year before. And for a lot of people, that number alone became the story. But that price shift didn't happen because the market shut down. Homes still sold. In fact, Florida closed over 360,000 single family homes in 2025, slightly more than the year before. At the same time, more homeowners listed their properties, inventory stayed elevated, and interest rates remained high. So, what you really had wasn't disappearing demand, you had changing leverage. Buyers didn't vanish, they became selective, and sellers who adjusted to the reality did fine, while the sellers who priced based on yesterday's market struggled. This wasn't the kind of year where you could just list your home and expect momentum to carry it. But it also wasn't a year where demand disappeared. It was a year where the market demanded better decision making from everyone involved. As this is landing, think about your own experience for a second. Did 2025 feel like a bad market to you? Or did it just feel a little bit more difficult? A big reason that 2025 felt the way it did comes down to inventory. Across Florida, active listings hovered near 100,000 homes, and month supply spent much of the year just under 5 months. That may not sound dramatic, but compared to the madness we lived through a few years ago, it completely changed how deals got done. This became a market where the house had to make sense. If a home was priced correctly and in good condition, it sold. If it wasn't, it sat longer, saw price reductions, and needed more concessions to get across to the finish line. That's why the median price softened slightly. Not because the values collapsed, but because sellers were finally getting tested. And that's where a lot of frustration came from, especially for sellers who were still anchored by peak market expectations. When you think back on the deals you saw or listings you followed, what do you think mattered more this year? Price or condition? You also can't tell the story of 2025 without talking about interest rates. Rates stayed elevated for most of the year, and instead of killing the market, they split it into two very different lanes. On one side, you had the cash buyers and the very strong buyers who kept moving forward. On the other side, you had the payment sensitive buyers who slowed down, paused, or completely stepped back altogether. That's why, even with higher rates, about 28% of Florida's single family homes still sold for cash in 2025. So the market didn't freeze, it segmented. And that segmentation is exactly why some people felt like nothing was selling, while others felt like the market was still competitive. Both things were true at the same time. Looking back now, what do you think had a bigger impact in 2025? Interest rates or inventory? Now, here's where the statewide story really comes to life. Because when you break Florida down by county, you start to see how the same interest rate environment produced very different outcomes depending on the buyer pool, price points, and local dynamics. Let's start with Miami-Dade, then move into Broward County, and finish with Palm Beach County. Miami-Dade in 2025 was resilient, but it wasn't untouched. The median single-family price in Miami-Dade finished the year around $655,000, up roughly 4% year over year. That alone tells you that demand did not disappear. At the same time, inventory increased and month supply moved closer to balance, landing around 4.7 months. Buyers had more options. Sellers had less urgency working in their favor. Cash remained a major force in the market, which helped support pricing, but sellers could no longer rely on the hype alone. Homes still sold. Pricing just had to be justified. Miami didn't break in 2025. It slowed down and normalized. So when you think about Miami today, does it still feel bulletproof to you? Or does it finally feel like more of a balanced market? Broward County told a very different story. The median single family price in Broward finished 2025 around $620,000, basically flat, up only a half percent from the year before. Inventory rose modestly, and months of supply stayed tighter than in Miami and Palm Beach, finishing near 4.1 months. What that created was true negotiation market. Homes still sold, but sellers had to meet the market. Buyers had leverage, but only if they were prepared. Deals were made in inspections, credits, and realistic adjustments, not bidding wars. Broward wasn't hot, but it wasn't cold. It was practical. If you were watching Broward closely this year, do you think buyers gained more leverage compared to the year before? Palm Beach is probably the most misunderstood of the three. Inventory and months of supply climbed higher than Miami and Broward, reaching roughly 5.4 months. Yet, the median single family price finished the year at around $630,000, essentially flat. That's because Palm Beach behaves differently. It's more equity driven, more lifestyle focused, and less dependent on financing. Buyers took their time, but they didn't need deep discounts to move forward. Palm Beach didn't feel slow, it felt deliberate. Does Palm Beach feel more luxury driven now, or does it just feel expensive across the board? When you step back and look at Florida and all the three counties together, the median price tells a very clear story. This wasn't a year where value was erased. It was a year where pricing power reset. Statewide prices dipped slightly. Miami gained, Broward held steady, and Palm Beach completely paused. That's not weakness, that is normalization. Looking forward, what happens next isn't about one rate cut or one headline. It's about confidence. If rates stabilize, buyers come back faster than most people expect. If inventory continues to grow faster than demand, negotiation becomes normal. And if rates fall without economic stress, demand can accelerate quickly. So the real question as we move forward isn't what prices crash, it's who controls that pace, buyers or sellers. And if you're personally thinking about buying, selling, or investing, leave a comment with whatever your plan is and let me know what city you plan to transact in. I read these comments and I use them to shape the next video. If you found this video useful, send it to someone who could use it. And don't forget to like and subscribe for updates on all things real estate. Once again, thank you for watching. See you next time.